of all the things one could be doing early in the morning is swapping needles on your carburator. Welcome back to the second part of my Tunisian adventure out in the Sahara Desert. Having left the shipyard behind in Monastir, I was already driving south and I was ecstatic about yet one more weekend in the desert. My destination for the day was the town of Ghomrassen in the south of the country, and that was about 420 kilometers away from where I was, which translated to 6.5, almost 7 full hours of driving towards the desert. When I chose Tunisia as my destination, I knew very little, actually I knew absolutely nothing about this country. And the more I drove through Tunisia, the more I was being impressed. Kilometer after kilometer, turn after turn, mile after mile, I just couldn't believe my eyes of where I was driving through pretty much every single day. I passed through the village of Toujane on my way to Ghomrassen, and that was a beautiful little spot for a quick stop, a lunch break, a coffee break, stretch my legs a little bit, and paddle on towards the town of Ghomrassen. Having completed about a month on the road by now, I was actually really impressed on how well Bob has been handling the terrain and the road and the trip so far, because every single day when I would get in, turn that key, I would push him through 4, 5, maybe even 600 kilometers of straight drive, very few, very small stops, but he was being a lad through it all. Me being me, once I arrived at the town of Ghomrassen, I actually got lost. It took me a while to realize that my Airbnb was actually not in town, but slightly out of town. That slightly was a bit further out than just slightly, so I ended up driving in the middle of a valley, out of the boonies, trying to figure out where the home I would spend the night was. Eventually, what seemed to be the place I had to go was a house out by itself, out in the middle of nowhere. And once there, all tired, thirsty, hungry, sweaty, kinda frustrated from the drive, I had to figure out a way to get in, take a shower, get some rest. And that proved to be a bit harder than expected. Once I finally realized where I had to be, that was the wrong spot and my actual Airbnb was on a road right behind that building. Instead of me driving half a kilometer back and going all the way around, I decided to take myself a shortcut and finally make it to my destination, because truth be told, I was actually exhausted and the only thing I had in my mind at the moment was a cold shower, a cup of coffee and a proper meal. And though it seemed as if I was driving towards a dungeon, that turned out to be a super clean, spotless, very comfortable Berber cave house where I spent a wonderful, chilled night. Waking up to the call of a rooster was something I hadn't done in a really long time, and I couldn't be more grateful for my choice of an Airbnb out in the middle of nowhere with peace and tranquility all around. Speaking of peace and tranquility, I have to admit that I'm actually allergic to prolonged sessions of both. Hence, it was time for me to mess about with Bob. Check my water level and ensure all was okay, brake fluid level, clutch fluid level, a schloss is enough, and then it was time for my carburetor.
Good morning, everyone. So, while my coffee is getting a bit cooler, I figured I'm gonna run a check on my carburetor. So, what's been happening is when I was preparing the engine for the trip, I figured I would go standard with everything, and that included my carburetor. Now, after having driven Bob for about 3,000 kilometers, now where do I safely put that? Here. You go there. Alrighty. Spring. Bob's running rich. So I want to try and change the needle to something leaner. Now, again, this is an HS4 SU carburetor, and as per the manual, the needle on the carb should be an ABX type and a red spring. This is a red spring, this is an ABX needle, but I'm still running rich. So I'll try and lean it out by using a leaner needle for the carburetor. Yep. And I have a collection of needles with me which I can swap depending on what are the road conditions I'll be driving through. So I'm gonna switch my ABX type needle, and I will go with an ADH, if I can find it. Oh, there you go, first grab, and see how he behaves with that. Out of all the things one could be doing early in the morning is swapping needles on your carburetor. Now, this is something I forgot to mention. Though this is an HS4 carburetor, I'm using the spring from a HIF38. Now, the reason I'm doing that is the HIF38 spring is a larger diameter one, though it has the same stiffness, and sits on the outside diameter of the piston. The benefit of that is as the piston during operation, as it moves up and down, the spring being on the outside diameter stops the piston from trying to do this and create extra wear in the carburetor. HS4s, the original type of spring, is a smaller diameter one which sits in here. The downside to that spring is that as the piston moves up and down, because it sits on the inside inner diameter, the piston has the tendency to do this kind of movement. It wiggles in, and with operation you create too much wear on the dashpot, and then you start getting issues. So when they introduced the HIF38 and HIF44, they changed the spring because they realized that too. So yeah, I'm taking advantage of that, and here's a HIF38 spring in my S4 carburetor. In you go. Ta-da. Ta-da. Ta-da-da-da. Now, one tool that I made, that's pretty handy in cases like that, and because I'm a sloppy dude, is I made me a small little magnetic pot. So this is a plastic cover from God knows what, and I just stuck a magnet, an old speaker magnet underneath it. So you can put your screws in there, leave that there, and you don't lose them, which can be handy when you're in the middle of nowhere out in the desert in South Tunisia. Though I do have spares with me, but there's no point or reason in losing your original ones. In you go. Another tool I've made is this one. So I can basically adjust my mixture with ease, and it's nothing more than a chopped up 17mm spanner with a bit of a hose cut out from a water hose that I fit at the back of the tool so that I can have a firm grip to it and I don't lose it. And this is to go behind my carburator, and it's the proper length to fit in between the carburator and the firewall to allow me to turn it and adjust my fuel mixture. So let's fire him up. I'm gonna wait for him to warm up, then I'm gonna adjust the mixture. Coffee in the meantime.
With my fuel mixture already set up, I was already at the first destination of my day, which was the Ksar Oulade Soltane, yet another Star Wars filming site. A Ksar is basically a fortified granary, a place where people would store their grain, and it's built on a hilltop to protect their most valuable food source from raiding parties, which used to be a very often scenario back in the days. It is now a tourist destination because it was featured in the film Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. In some of the scenes, used to represent the slave quarters of Mosque, where the character Anakin Skywalker lived as a boy. Leaving all the Star Wars stories behind, it was time for me to press on with the rest of my day and my travel. Having swapped a needle, I was constantly monitoring Bob's behavior on how he handled the terrain with the new setup. Maybe going uphill on a straight line, or how well he would battle a dirt road, which in the area I was in was a very frequent scenario. Hitting the sweet spot between reliability, fuel consumption, and performance was something that was all too important given the terrain I was driving through. And since no one ever knows what the road keeps in store for you, it never hurts to be prepared and know exactly what to expect or what you could get out of a given setup. Though I ended up driving through a full-blown worksite, potholes, dirt roads, and bulldozers weren't enough to deter Bob from taking us where we wanted to be on that specific day. And that was the magnificent site of the Mosque of the Seven Dormants, or the Seven Slippers. In all honesty, I'll never find proper words to describe the absolute joy, the feeling of fulfillment of making it to a destination that far away from home in a car that's 50 years old that still made it without much of a fuss all the way to where I wanted to go. Traveling as much as I do around the world, I've had my fair share of visiting mosques, but the one of the Seven Dormants in Tunisia was a very unique experience. Its elegance, its simplicity, its tranquility, it was something different. The site of the Seven Dormants has a very interesting aura about it. It was definitely a pivotal moment on my trip because as I was climbing up the hill to go up the tower, I realized all the things I had to do to make it thus far on a road I never thought I'd take in Tunisia. This was definitely no easy task. This is something that I actually wanted and tried to do since 2021 when I started my YouTube channel, and it took me 4 years and a bit more to actually climb up the ladder of challenges and events, survive it all, and actually make it all the way to the destination that I found myself on that specific day. Easy? It most definitely wasn't. Fulfilling? It certainly was. And had it not been for the struggles and the challenges I had to go through, it would never ever feel the same. And as I was sitting there at the top of the tower, taking in the view, all I could think of and dream of was the next destination and the challenges that lay ahead.